A Korean man boards a plane to Hawaii with his young daughter, unaware that it is about to turn into a nightmare. Mid-flight, passengers begin mysteriously dying, one by one, including the captain himself. Chaos erupts in the sky. And just when they think it can't get worse, it does. As they attempt to land, the US government shuts its doors on them, forcing the plane back into the air. Desperate, the co-pilot sets course for Japan, only to be greeted by military fighter jets and a brutal warning: turn back or be shot down. With nowhere else to go, they head for home. But South Korea isn't welcoming them either. Massive protests erupt blocking the runway, and now the passengers are truly stranded. Will any of the 150 souls on board make it out alive? Or is this the flight that will never land? The film opens at Incheon Airport. A man named Jin-suk stands at the check-in counter. He wants to know which flight has the most passengers. The staff politely tells him they can't share that information. But instead of backing off, he snaps at her and even insults her. Not far from him, a father named Jae-hyuk is waiting in line with his young daughter, Soo-min. Soo-min tells her dad she needs to use the bathroom and walks off on her own. But the women's restroom has a long line, so she sneaks into the men's bathroom instead. Inside, something disturbing is happening. Jin-suk is standing over the sink. Blood drips from under his arm. He's cutting himself open, just beneath the armpit, sliding a strange capsule into the wound and begins to stitch it back up. Just as he's finishing, he hears something, a small noise from another cubicle. Someone is in there, watching. He starts moving towards it. But before he can open it, Jae-hyuk bursts into the bathroom, calling out for Soo-min. She runs to him, and they leave together. Outside, Jae-hyuk is gently applying ointment on Soo-min's arm for her eczema. Jin-suk suddenly walks up to them. He smiles at Soo-min and tells Jae-hyuk she's adorable. But then, he starts asking personal questions about his wife. Feeling uncomfortable, he pulls Soo-min away and walks off. Jin-suk watches them go. When he learns that they're heading to Hawaii, he immediately goes to the counter and buys a ticket for the same flight. Elsewhere, in Ho, a police officer, is at home with his daughter. She tells him that mom is going on vacation to Hawaii with her friends. And soon, their lives will all be connected, by one flight, and one terrifying journey. At the police station, In-ho arrives just as a new report comes in. A group of kids has reported a strange video online. Someone is threatening to attack a plane. Most of the officers dismiss it as just another prank. But In-ho isn't so sure. There's something unsettling the video and he decides to check it out himself. He drives over to the address to learn more about the situation. When they walk past the man's apartment, the front door is already slightly open and a foul, rotting smell hits them immediately. Carefully, In-ho steps inside. What they find is horrifying: a human corpse, wrapped tightly in plastic. Soon, the entire place is sealed off with police tape. Forensics teams begin combing through the apartment for evidence. When the autopsy results come back, the cause of death is clear: poison. But that's not the most disturbing part. They find dozens of video recordings, experiments done on rats. In each one, a strange powder is used. The rats start coughing up blood, then they die. The forensic team confirms it: the powder is a frozen virus, highly contagious, and extremely dangerous. The dead man in the apartment tests positive for the same virus. Panic starts to grow. They need to find out the owner of the apartment immediately. Back at the airport, Jin-suk goes through security. A staff member questions a strange metal object in his bag, but he calmly says it's just his asthma inhaler. Meanwhile, the three pilots are finishing their pre-flight checks. One by one, the passengers begin to board the plane to Hawaii: Jin-suk, Jae-hyuk, Soo-min, and In-ho's wife among them. Once the plane is in the air, flight attendants begin serving meals. Jae-hyuk nervously asks for alcohol. He doesn't like flying, it makes him uneasy. In the bathroom, Jin-suk pulls out the capsule he had hidden inside his body. He breaks it open and carefully inserts the substance into his inhaler. Then, he starts spraying the virus into the air. As he steps out, Soo-min is right outside. But before she can head in, another man cuts the line, saying it's urgent. Jin-suk leans down and whispers something to Soo-min, then quietly returns to his seat. Inside, the man starts to feel uncomfortable. Powder keeps falling on him from above. Alarmed, he informs the flight attendant, who quickly comes and starts wiping the place down. She has no idea what she's dealing with. Back in his seat, Jae-hyuk glances over at the passenger next to him who is watching a video on his phone. It's the same viral clip of the man threatening a plane attack. The man in the video, he looks exactly like Jin-suk. A terrible feeling settles over him. Jae-hyuk frantically searches for Soo-min, then rushes to the flight attendants. He shows them the video and tells them what he saw earlier: how Jin Suk had a wound under his arm, and how he whispered something terrifying to his daughter, everyone on this plane is going to die. The flight crew is shaken, but unsure. Is it really the same man? The chief stewardess walks over to Jin Suk and calmly asks to see his ID. He is hesitant, but later the stewardess comes back with a name card and says he's a scientist heading to Hawaii for a conference. The stewardess tells Jae-hyuk they'll keep an eye on him, but without proof, there's not much they can do. Meanwhile, In-ho and his team rush to the airport. They finally identify the man in the video, Ryu Jin Suk. And when they check the flight records, their worst fear comes true. He's already on board the plane to Hawaii. In-ho's heart drops. His wife is on that flight. Without wasting a second, he storms into airline control and demands they turn the plane back. But the staff tells him it's not that simple. It's already in the air, and international protocol must be followed. Back in the sky, the man who went into the bathroom earlier starts to feel sick. Red blisters break out across his skin. Then suddenly, his eyeball bursts, spilling blood. He stumbles, calling out for help. Suddenly, he vomits blood and collapses. A doctor on board rushes over, but before she can do much, she checks his pulse and announces that he is dead. Passengers look around in shock. And then, Jae-hyuk sees it. Jin Suk is smiling. He loses it. Jae-hyuk lunges at him, yelling that he's the one who did this. The two men fight in the aisle, passengers watching in terror. During the struggle, Jae-hyuk pulls up Jin Suk's shirt, revealing stitches under his arm. Just then, the pilot receives a warning message: there's been a terror threat. The co-pilot, Hyun-soo, rushes out to investigate. He finds the two men fighting and steps in to stop it. He turns to Jin Suk and asks firmly, "Are you Ryu Jin Suk?" Jin Suk pretends not to understand. But before anyone can stop him, he suddenly runs down the aisle, spraying more of the deadly substance into the air. Chaos breaks out. Passengers scream. Eventually, they manage to tackle him and pin him down. The co-pilot and the stewardess tie him up. Later, Jae-hyuk and Hyun-soo speak privately. It turns out they know each other, but there's bad blood between them. Then things get worse. More passengers begin coughing. Even the crew members are getting sick. The co-pilot quickly informs the captain. The other co-pilot and a flight attendant have already fallen ill. Hyun-soo makes a rational decision to not enter the cockpit. If he gets infected, they'll lose both pilots. They must protect at least one to land the plane safely. But, the nightmare is only beginning. The flight is carrying a deadly virus, and worse, the plane is an older model, meaning the air circulation system recycles the same air, letting the virus spread even faster. An emergency meeting is called. Government officials and the minister gather around, trying to decide their next move. They find out that Jin Suk once worked at a pharmaceutical company called Brickham, but when they reach out, the company coldly refuses to cooperate. Time is slipping away. People are dying. So, In-ho makes a risky suggestion: they should negotiate with Jin Suk. Try to offer him something if it means saving the passengers. They patch through a call to the plane and begin speaking with Jin Suk. But his response is chilling. He coldly says, "I don't want anything. I want everyone on this plane to die." He's not just a criminal. He's a psychopath. Suddenly, he lunges at the co-pilot, trying to attack him. But right then Jin Suk vomits blood. He smirks and says, "I knew I was going to die the moment I got on this flight." He never planned to survive. He just wanted to watch the world burn with him. Moments later, the plane is thrown into chaos. It begins to free fall, shaking violently. Passengers scream as bags and people fly into the air. It's complete panic. In the cockpit, the truth is revealed: the main pilot has died. He had unknowingly eaten a steak that was contaminated with the virus. Some of the powder had fallen into his meal. With all his might, another co-pilot rushes to the cockpit, trying to take control, but the plane keeps dropping. Then, suddenly, Jae-hyuk appears beside him. He grabs the controls and helps stabilize the plane. Together, the two men pull it out of the dive and get it back on course. A moment later, Hyun-soo and the chief stewardess arrive and are shocked to see Jae-hyuk in the cockpit. It turns out Jae-hyuk was once a famous pilot. He had quit after a tragic incident that left him with a deep fear of flying. Back at the airport, In-ho receives confirmation: Jin Suk is dead, and the main pilot is also gone. The situation is no longer a secret. The media has caught on, and the news is spreading fast. The minister has no choice but to make a public statement. She admits that there's a bioterror attack in the skies. On board, passengers begin to panic as they watch the news reports. People scream and cry, and more passengers begin to collapse, including the stewardess who had cleaned the bathroom where the virus was first released. The passengers decide they must separate the infected from the healthy. Those showing symptoms are told to move to the back of the plane. The rest are sent to the front. As Jae-hyuk and Soo-min prepare to move forward, a man suddenly shouts, "Look at her hands. She's got blisters." Jae-hyuk quickly explains that she just has eczema. But the man doesn't believe it. Soo-min, terrified, whispers to her dad, "It's okay. Let's go to the back." With no choice, Jae-hyuk carries her to the back, where the sick and the dying are waiting. At Brickham headquarters, In-ho and his team arrive, desperate to find more information about the virus. But just as they reach the entrance, a group of armed security guards blocks their path. In-ho tries to reason with them, but when the guards still refuse to move, a fight breaks out. Up in the sky, the plane is now nearing U.S. airspace. There's a flicker of hope among the passengers. They believe help is finally within reach. But that hope is quickly crushed. The U.S. government denies the plane entry, declaring that the virus on board is an unknown strain, and they cannot take the risk of letting it onto their soil. The crew, the families, the sick, everyone is in shock. They're told to keep flying for another 8 hours. Suddenly, another blow hits. The second pilot collapses. The chief stewardess tries her best to revive him, performing CPR, but it's too late. Now, only Hyun-soo is left to fly the plane. Back on the ground, In-ho receives a surprising phone call. A Brickham employee wants to report suspicious activities happening inside the company. She reveals something shocking: someone inside Brickham helped Jin-suk. That man fled the company right after the news broke out. In-ho and his team race to the suspect's apartment. When they arrive, the man sees them and takes off on a motorbike, speeding down the streets. A high-speed chase begins. In-ho's car skids and crashes, but just when it seems the suspect might escape, something unexpected happens. The man stops and helps them, and he finally opens up. "I didn't know he was going to do this. I was tricked by him." He then reveals the truth. A few years ago, Brickham had obtained a dangerous virus called SC1, a highly contagious strain. During testing, 3 people got infected. 2 died, but 1 survived. That lone survivor claimed that Jin-suk exposed them on purpose. To avoid scandal, Brickham fired Jin-suk, and he later faked interest in the virus to clear his name. Meanwhile, In-ho searches for the sole survivor, who might hold the key. Back on the plane, the control center notices something strange. Hyun-soo is flying faster than normal. They radio in and ask for an update. He tells them, "I don't know how much longer I can last." Everyone on the ground freezes. But despite the urgency, the authorities still can't find a runway for the plane to land. The passengers are running out of time. Jae-hyuk notices that the chief attendant has begun to show signs of the virus, as there are blisters on her arms. He tells her to take the fever-reducing vaccine and says, "You're the one everyone looks to right now." Later she asks him why did he quit being a pilot. Jae-hyuk's eyes darken before telling his story. On his last flight, one of the engines caught fire. He wanted to make an emergency landing, but the control tower told him not to. He made a split-second decision and landed the plane anyway. All the passengers survived, but during the evacuation, 2 flight attendants died while helping others escape. One of them was Hyun-soo's wife. Just then, the chief attendant receives a call from Hyun-soo. He's getting weaker. He tells her to prepare Jae-hyuk to take over, just in case, and Jae-hyuk agrees. While sitting beside Hyun-soo, the 2 men finally talk. It turns out Jae-hyuk was intending to migrate to Hawaii for Soo-min, as the air is cleaner there and better for Soo-min's eczema. Meanwhile on the ground, In-ho finally tracks down the lone survivor of the virus. The woman, now living in isolation at a hospital, has lost the life she once had. She confirms that the virus of the dead man is the same as what she had. Shortly after, the officials receive confirmation: Brickham does have the antidote. The minister and In-ho rush to the company headquarters and force their cooperation. The news spreads fast, and when the passengers on the plane hear that a cure exists, the entire cabin erupts in cheers. There's finally hope. But that hope is short-lived. As Hyun-soo's condition worsens, he decides to land the plane in Narita Airport, fearing they won't make it all the way to Korea. He issues an emergency declaration and begins preparing to descend. At the same time, the Korean officials pleads with Japan, explaining that they now have the vaccine. They beg them to let the plane land. But Japan says no. Even with a request from the Korean president himself, Japan refuses to accept the risk. Now desperate, Hyun-soo pushes ahead with the landing. The passengers panic. Everyone clutches their seats as the plane begins its descent. Suddenly, unidentified objects appear outside the windows. Fighter jets. They're from Japan, sent to warn the plane to turn back. But the flight doesn't change course. Without warning, the fighter jets fire warning shots, circling them aggressively. And then, one of them charges forward, head-on, straight for the plane. At the very last second, Hyun-soo yanks the controls and pulls the aircraft up, narrowly avoiding a deadly collision. But his body gives out, and he collapses inside the cockpit. Jae-hyuk rushes in. There's no time to think. He takes the controls. The crew gives Hyun-soo fever reducers, hoping it'll hold off the virus just long enough. Once again, Jae-hyuk is in the pilot seat, with hundreds of lives depending on him. Soon, news stations around the world began calling Japan's decision selfish and cruel. Under pressure, Japan's Prime Minister finally gives a statement. He says the virus on the plane has changed, it now spreads faster, and the antidote might not work anymore. He says he must protect his own people and had no choice. When the passengers on the plane hear this, their hearts sink again. The officials watching from the ground also feel hopeless. With no other option, the plane turns toward Seoul Air Base. But now, even some Korean officials have begun to hesitate. After hearing that the antidote might fail, they wonder if letting the plane land would risk the entire country. One official says quietly, maybe it's better to lose a few hundred than risk millions. But In-ho refuses to give up. His wife is on that plane. He decides to take a huge risk. He goes to the quarantine facility and offers himself as a test subject for the antidote. By the time the minister arrives, In-ho is already lying in bed, throwing up blood. The doctors give him the antidote, but minutes pass and he becomes unconscious. The antidote doesn't work. Meanwhile, Jae-hyuk's plane is getting closer to Seoul. But news spreads quickly on the ground. Protesters gather across Korea. Then, a message comes through, people are blocking the runway at Seoul Air Base. The plane cannot land. When the passengers hear the news, they are crushed. But then, a painful decision is made. For the safety of their families and their country, they choose not to land. The chief stewardess brings Soo-min to her father. The little girl says softly, "Dad, I think it's better if we don't land. I don't want my friends to get sick." The chief stewardess continues by saying, "Everyone on board, they're infected. And they've made a decision. They won't land." Jae-hyuk turns on the microphone and speaks to the nation. His voice is calm but heavy. "For the safety of everyone on the ground," he says, "we've chosen not to land. None of us wanted this. But we understand your fear, and this is the only thing we can do now." Then he adds, "We will now cut off all communications. This is goodbye." Inside the control center, everyone bow their heads in grief. On the plane, the passengers take out their phones. They begin calling their families for the last time, leaving final messages and saying goodbye. People on the ground look up at the sky, watching the plane disappear into the clouds, tears streaming down their faces. But just when everything seems lost, something happens. In-ho opens his eyes. His breathing has calmed. The antidote is working. The minister gives a direct order, "Tell the plane to come back." But there's a problem. Jae-hyuk already shut down the radio. They can't reach the cockpit. So, the team reaches out to the passengers' families, begging them to try and pass along the news. A few minutes later, Jae-hyuk gets the message. He confirms it with the airbase. This time, they are cleared to land. Cheers and tears fill the cabin. After everything they've been through, they're finally going to survive. The protesters finally clear the runway, and the plane turns toward the nearest airbase. But there's another problem, they're almost out of fuel. The engine could shut down at any moment. Their only option now is to glide down without power. The control center quickly suggests Suwon Airfield, believing it's the safest option. But Jae-hyuk studies the map and believes Seongmo Airfield is a better choice. They warn him that Seongmo's runway might be too short and they could overshoot and crash. But Jae-hyuk decides to trust his instincts. Before preparing to land, Jae-hyuk turns to Hyun-soo. "About your wife? I'm sorry. Back then, I made the best decision I could." Hyun-soo looks at him, then says, "If it were me, I would have done the same." Back in the control room, officials watch with tense faces. Jae-hyuk switches off the power to conserve every last bit of fuel. The cabin darkens, and silence fills the plane. Using his years of flying experience, he carefully guides the aircraft, circling the airfield to slow it down. The passengers grip their seats, holding their breath. Then, when it looks like he may have missed his chance, Jae-hyuk switches the engine back on and begins the descent. The plane shakes violently. Turbulence throws everyone against their seats. Jae-hyuk grips the controls and pushes forward, braking hard as the plane slams onto the runway. They made it. In the aftermath, Soo-min walks beside her father as they go to reunite with the other survivors. Around them, life slowly begins to return to normal, but not for everyone. In-ho, who risked everything to test the antidote, is now permanently paralyzed from the virus. But his sacrifice gave everyone else a second chance.